Stupid planes, dude. Get off my lawn, you kids.
I love the young people.
So today I want to go over glute training made simple. So there's really three things that we want to keep in mind as staples for training the glutes. The glutes do extend the hip, but we don't just want to train blanket hip extension. We want to break it down to things that are stressful in the shortened position and things that are in the lengthened position. And what that'll look like is a shortened position exercise will be something usually horizontally loaded, like a hip thrust or a back extension. And something that will train the glutes in the lengthened or stretched position will be something vertically loaded, like an RDL or a squat or a lunge. The third category, so we have shortened, we have lengthened, and then we wanna make sure that we do abduction or external rotation. So things that either directly drive the leg out away from the midline or externally rotate the leg out and away. It's also really important to have a healthy mix of unilateral or single leg and bilateral motions. So as we go through these examples, I'm gonna give 2 examples of each of those 3 categories, and one will be unilateral while the other is bilateral. So the first vertically loaded or stretched position exercise that we want to hit today is the goblet squat. And if you're not comfortable with a bar on your back, that's fine. There's actually a good amount of data that shows that a weight closer to your midline will actually increase glute activation. So we'll hold the dumbbell out in front of us and we'll drop nice and deep into a squat. Here, we really want to make sure that we get as much range of motion as we can before we come back up. So we want to go nice and deep, but maintain tension. We're not resting at the bottom, and back up from there. This is gonna allow us to train the glutes as they're lengthened in this bottom position. And generally in these positions, the bottom is going to be the most difficult part of the range of motion. For our unilateral variation of a vertically loaded or stretched position exercise, we're gonna do a braced single leg dumbbell RDL. So Maggie's gonna be holding on to something vertical like the rack next to her. She's gonna have the weight loaded on the opposite side of the leg that she's targeting, the one that will remain on the ground. And she goes through an RDL, but with only one leg. So she keeps that neutral spine, very limited knee bend. She doesn't let that knee translate forward all that much and comes back up. And just like a traditional RDL, as she goes down, she's gonna proceed till she feels a stretch in that hamstring, and then she comes back up from there. So keep going. We also wanna use that leg as if there's a straight rod all the way through our entire body. As the head goes down, the leg goes back, sort of like those lawn ornaments where their heads dip into the water and back up. And whatever reps we get on one side, we'll then get on the other side. The classic shortened exercise for the glutes is the barbell hip thrust. Now, the reason that it's important that we have shortened and lengthened exercises is that active tension is going to be highest for shortened position, where passive tension will be much higher for those lengthened position exercises. So a hip thrust is a great bilateral variation for us to train the glutes when they're at that shortened or contracted position. So if you have a hip thruster like we do here, it's a really, really easy setup. You can still do this with a bench, but then you'll definitely need something like an RX pad that we have here to be able to prop you up and get your shoulder blades closer to the bench that you're trying to get on. So Maggie's gonna bring her feet in and place them flat on the ground. She's going to drive that bar forward with her hips, and she keeps her head forward so she can get to a posterior pelvic tilt. That's gonna help really reinforce that shortened position and get the glutes to fire a ton. So you'll generally tap and you'll go right back up to the top. Yep, and you can go ahead and just get a few reps in here. Notice that from Maggie's sternum and down moves quite a bit. From her sternum up doesn't move all that much, and it allows her to keep this really good shoulder position while reinforcing that posterior pelvic tilt that's important to feel that maximal glute activation. So the 45-degree hyper is another exercise that is basically horizontally loaded, and it trains the glutes in a shortened position. We're gonna do this unilaterally today as well. So Maggie's gonna hold that dumbbell under her chin, and she's gonna drive her hips forward into the pad to bring her body up and return back down. Now, if this is too advanced at first, you can do a variation that's like a pseudo unilateral variation where you can take this foot and hook it over the top here. Yep, and allow that leg to help a little bit as you primarily target the leg that's underneath the support. This is a great exercise to target not just the glutes in the shortened position, but also the hamstrings and spinal erectors. The side lying hip raise is a great body weight variation for external rotation / abduction. So we're gonna get lined up just like Maggie is here, up on our elbow, and we're gonna drive through that bottom knee as we lift our hips up and then separate our legs as much as possible, and then sink that hip back down to the ground. Now the cool thing is here, as you're going through and getting repeated reps here, we're also gonna slightly turn our upper body in at the bottom so we can get a little bit more adduction and more range of motion on that bottom glute. And both glutes are really gonna be working here to really drive those legs away from the midline of the body. Our second exercise for external rotation or abduction is a lateral band walk. If we have something like a glute loop, we're gonna place it just above the knees. If it's too difficult or you can't get enough range of motion, you'll move it a little bit higher and closer to the hips. If you want more resistance, you can move it a little bit lower. Generally, we start with a little bit of a hip hinge. And from here, we're gonna take a step far out to one side, match it with the other leg, and then step back to the start and match it with the other leg again. Generally, because we're going for a little bit of metabolic stress here, we're gonna keep moving continuously. Don't spend too long with both feet on the ground. For the sake of metabolic conditioning, we're gonna keep up a tempo sort of like Maggie has here. We really wanna go for more of a burn here, and we're generally gonna perform higher reps throughout each set. No one's supposed to see this. Go your glutes. Go your fucking... You know, Connor DeAngelis once said, every exercise is a bicep exercise. It's every... All right, get out of here. All right.